Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Oh man, buying that extra cord was one of the best things I've done.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here, Cliff. I appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. I enjoy coming over, and hopefully these podcasts are of value to someone.
That would be nice, and if they are, please like, comment, and subscribe.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Doing the things.
Yeah. Today, I'd like to talk about a book that has really influenced the way I think, and it's called Power versus Force by David Hawkins, MD, PhD. And one of the things that he discovered was that we know intuitively within our body whether something is true or not, and we can test it by muscle testing called kinesiology, where you just put out your arm and then you make the statement and you think about that statement for a minute and then resist with your arm straight out to the side. And then he would push on your arm, and if the answer was true, your arm would be steady, and if it was false, your arm would collapse to your side. I mean, you just can't hold it up.
Right. Strong, true statements create strong
and he
physiology.
was able to teach that to a number of doctors, medical doctors, so that they could better diagnose what the problem with the patient was. And they would go through this process, and then they would, once they figured out what the problem was, then they would think about potential solutions for that, what kind of pills or drugs they could administer or might work, and then do the kinesiology test on that again, and whichever one worked, you just prescribe that for your patient. Right. So he had about 1,200 doctors, if I recall, connected with him across the United States because he was teaching this kind of thing. And one of the things he discovered was a map, what he calls a map of consciousness. And it's a vibrational frequency, and you can tell it within yourself you can tell the truth within yourself just by closing your eyes and thinking for a minute about the energy level. How does it make you feel? Like the bottom of the line is shame. And it has a vibrational frequency of 20. And if you compare that to, say, despair, which would you rather not have the most?
Right.
So, and then if you go to despair to fear, which would you rather have, fear or despair? And then it would move on up to desire. Which would you rather have, desire or anger? And which would affect you emotionally more? Would pride or hate, which one would be stronger for you? Pride or hate?
Pride.
So it goes on up the line like that, and courage is at the level of 200. And courage is where the level 200 is where everything changes from having negative thoughts to having positive thoughts, or at least the majority of your thoughts would be positive at the level of 200. It appears that right now in the world, people vibrate at somewhere between 175 and 195. The whole human race is not up to 200, which is courage.
Right.
And then it moves on up from there to neutrality or trust. And 310 is willingness or optimism. 350 is acceptance or forgiveness. 400 is reason or understanding. 500 is love or reverence. 540 is joy or serenity. 600 is bliss or peace. And 700 to 1,000 is enlightenment. So the great spiritual teachers, such as Jesus and Buddha and what's the Indian one, Shiva,
Krishna.
Krishna. These men have achieved enlightenment during their lifetime, and they became completely peaceful and were able to produce all kinds of what most people would call miracles.
Right.
And a miracle is just anything that happens that is positive that you don't understand why it happened.
That's a good definition for a miracle.
So those are the processes, and I think it's just a matter of meditating on where do you think you are at the moment in this scale, or are your thoughts fearful? Are you anxious all the time? If that's the case, then you're down around 100, and that's where most people, especially people who worry, people who worry drop down into the vibrational frequency of 100. Can't be helped, if you're worrying. So if you can get yourself even up to desire and hope are at the same frequency, and the problem with desire is the idea that you don't have it now.
Right. It's a recognition of lack.
Right.
That's what desire is.
And that's the way hope is too.
Mm-hmm.
You're hoping for something that you hope happens, but there's still lack creeping in there or something like that, that forms those things.
One thing I would like to look at some point is, because in scripture they talk about faith, hope, and love, and hope doesn't mesh with faith.
Right.
So
it doesn't mesh with love either.
Right. And that's one of the things I need to look into is what the translation is, because faith, hope, and love, one of those things doesn't belong.
Right, yeah.
So I wonder if there was some word in Greek or Aramaic or something, Hebrew, where hope it means actual vision or something like that.
Right.
Where, because that would make sense, was faith, hope, and love, faith, vision, and love.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, one of the things that the sayings that comes from the Bible is that the kingdom of heaven is within. Mm-hmm. Jesus supposedly said that. There was other people who said it way before he did, but he's the one that got the credit. So, if the kingdom of heaven is within, and God is in heaven, God has to be within too.
Right. That was one of the things. I was just listening to a Neville Goddard lecture, and he was talking about Christ being crucified on Calvary. And I'll have to look up the word, but have you heard this lecture?
I probably have, but I don't remember it.
So
right at the moment.
He talked about it, how in the Greek and Aramaic it actually means skull.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not because the hill resembled a skull. It's because Christ is within, and when he is crucified in the human skull, because a term in Greek translates to cranium, crucified in the skull, then he is also reborn from the base of the spine through, you know, that's why there was the snake with Adam and Eve,
Right.
reborn through that energy, and Christ within, and then he's crucified in the skull.
Right.
And he's reborn, and Christ gives the injunction, pick up your cross every day and bear it as I have.
Right.
Well, our cross is our earthly body.
Right.
That is what we get up and we bear it willingly, just as he did when he came to earth to experience all the trials of man.
Right.
and the way he explained that whole story, I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
And I just love the way he's able to explain it.
Yeah. Yeah. And Neville Goddard said that the Christ is actually your imagination.
Right.
Because if the kingdom of heaven is within, and it's an emotional place of joy, of
peaceful creation.
Yeah, peaceful understanding, harmony, love, all of those things are
one with all.
Yeah, all of those things are a part of heaven, and all of the things that are a part of hell are everything from pride and anger and hate.
Down.
Everything from 200 down
right.
is the kingdom of hell. And I know we've talked about this before, but everyone has their own idea about what is good and what is evil. Mm-hmm. If they like it, they call it good.
Right.
If they don't like it, they call it evil.
Right.
But they're the one that's making the choice. They're the one that's deciding which is heaven and which is hell, and which one they focus on. You know, if you focus on things that you love and you like, your attention will be gathered to those things, and the next thing you know, your whole life takes a shift to the positive.
Right.
Because you're just focusing on everything that you like.
You start seeing what you're looking for.
Right.
It's so basic, and it's stuff even an atheist could believe in.
Right.
It's just so patently observable for oneself.
Right.
And one thing that's interesting too about the scale of consciousness is where we know that when one slows down a frequency, it turns from a particle to a wave. You slow it down more and it becomes material.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we sink in our vibrational thoughts, the more we bring our thoughts down, the more we physically are in the material and affected by the material.
Mm-hmm.
We're more at risk to disease, pain, suffering, all of those things.
Yeah, and we know that from quantum physics, because in quantum physics, all you have is the wave until somebody's thought creates the particle, and that's slowing everything down.
Right.
To the physical realm, because as a wave it cannot be measured, and as a particle it can.
Right. It's slowed down, so it literally materializes.
Right.
Well, that's one of the interesting things about the Jewish faith is they don't believe in hell in the way the Christians had turned it into, which was just an extraction they pulled out of pagan traditions.
Yeah, Greek mythology.
Yeah, it was not out of the Hebrew tradition, because the Jewish belief is that Earth is hell, because it's the lowest you can sink on the material plane.
Oh, okay.
And that heaven is a purely spiritual place, and since Earth is purely material, it's hell. And that's where Satan came, because it was as low as he could be cast, because it's pure material. So if it's seen in that way, from not as a mythology of heaven and hell and where the gods are and where Satan is and all of that pagan belief, but it's seen as God is the highest immaterial frequency, the place of pure being where one is all. Earth is a place where we have all these pluralities and dualities of good and evil,
Right.
and all of that.
Right.
And I think that's more of a helpful concept than heaven, earth, hell,
Right.
is where earth is the lowest one can sink.
Right.
And that for me makes more sense and is also more of a helpful concept. And that's one of the things that I've experienced growing up the way I did and learning all these different myths and legends and theologies, is that we have to conceptualize it somehow if we're using our brain.
Mm-hmm.
Or we're trying to explain it to someone who hasn't had the same experience we've had. We have to use an analogy, just like Christ did in Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't say, this is how it is and this is what occurred, and there was actually a master with 3 servants and he did this and it was in this town at this time, blah blah. He doesn't say that. He said he uses it as a story to explain to someone using the rational mind who has not had the experience of truth,
Right.
to explain it in a way that makes sense. And so to use the concepts of heaven and hell and God and Satan as these concepts to try to help people who thousands of years ago didn't even have the wheel, let's say.
Right.
You have to find some way to at least cultivate the ideas at the very least.
Right.
And when one gets into the teachings of even the fathers of the Catholic Church and the patriarchs of the Orthodox traditions, a lot of the most devout ones, I can tell from the way they write as more of a philosophy, as a story to explain a thing, not the actual literal meaning of what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
But they have to operate within that framework to at least cultivate these values and ideas, which at least perpetuate it. Because there have been some things I've read from Catholics who, they used a lot of the Greek writings that had been preserved, and a lot of what they write and talk about sounds almost like heresy.
Mm-hmm.
But they were using the story the best way they could to communicate it to others.
Right.
And some people take it as the literal word, and that's what it is, and some don't take it at all, and some go beyond just what's being said and grasp the concept.
Right.
And I think there's value to that in an earth where we're at such a low tone.
Right.
Is where at least somehow the story does and Jung talked about that, so did Dr. Jordan Peterson, about these stories have maintained because there's something that speaks to us innately, even if we don't necessarily grasp the whole thing.
Right.
There's something there where we know we may misunderstand it and misuse it, but we know there's something there. There's something at that core.
Mm-hmm.
And as a cultural preservation method and hope to bring people further along, so far it's been the best vehicle we've had for that is using this religious story.
Mm-hmm.
And some stay stuck in a pagan superstitious mindset with it, and some are able to use it to expand their consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah, and I discovered a number of years ago that paganism always has a number of attributes that are similar to one another. They're involved in all pagan religions. The first one is that the god of paganism is always made in the image and likeness of a man, sometimes a woman, but mankind.
Sometimes a bird.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, all kinds of different stuff. Cows were really good popular at one time. But the pagan religion tries to tell you what to think rather than encourage you to how to think.
Right.
rather
Just
than
like
actually thinking. They want to think for you so that you pay them money. That's what the whole paganism is about. Uh, and anyone who asserts that some other being is a god outside of themselves, that they look at that they don't have a personal connection with their creator. They have to put it in the hands of a man or something, and like that, it becomes a pagan religion the moment they do that.
just like the public school system.
Yeah, right.
Right. Well, with my guest yesterday, we spoke about. I was asked what my thoughts on religion are, and I said, "You mean how was I raised? What was I raised in?" It was, well, all of it, and I ended my 1.5 minute table topic on saying, and I believe that if we see God as something separate from ourselves and outside of ourselves, then we're worshiping the wrong God.
Yeah,
If all of the scripture says the Father and I are one, you are a child of God, God is within, you are one with God, with me, through me,
right,
you are with with your Father who is in heaven.
right,
All this stuff, but somehow everybody misses that,
right.
and it's not a heretical. It's
Yeah,
not even anti scripture.
right.
It's just
Yeah, and I think that most people who read the Bible read it for the purpose of remembering it so that they can quote it. But they don't read it in order to gather intuitive knowledge.
right. It's just like how most people have conversations with people. They just listen so they can respond instead of listening to understand the other person.
Right.
And when we read for that same reason, that was one of the reasons why for so long I just couldn't get into philosophy, even though it turns out my whole life I was, but I couldn't get into it because all the whole image I had of people who did that were just so pedantic and uptight and didn't deal with the natural world at all. They, as there's a saying, he who has his head in the clouds more often than not has his butt in the mud.
Mm-hmm.
And but when I realized, again, it all comes down to intent, and when they read these things so that they can tell all their friends that they've read the same books, and
Right.
okay, I read Nietzsche and Goethe and Foucault and all the rest of the stuff. It's like, okay, well, what did you get from it? Well, he talks about, no. What did you get from it? What are your thoughts on it? Well, Nietzsche said, or Epictetus said, no. Like, what do you think about things? A lot of people that I've talked to who have read those books in school, they had no idea. They read Siddhartha, and it's like, oh, well, it was nice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, what did you get from it? What was your favorite part? Well, I read it.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you may as well just read one book and actually understand it than read 50 books and just brag about how you read these books.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Well, and I do have a lot of books on my shelf that I've not read, but I'm getting to them.
Right.
So,
Yeah. This book really impressed me with his personal experience and that sort of stuff, which happened to him really early on. If I remember correctly, he was 10 or 12 years old whenever he first became aware of his infinite self. He was it was the middle of winter, and he was in, I don't know, Michigan or Wisconsin or someplace where it got really cold and the snow blew, And he was making his rounds delivering newspapers, and he froze to death on his bicycle and fell over in the snow, just passed out, and fell over in the snow. And he just had this real peaceful, calm feeling about him. And then he had this thought that his dad would just be so hurt if he died. And he decided to come back.
Right.
And his dad actually found him in the snowdrift and, took him home and thought about and that kind of stuff. But the experience was so profound that he never, ever forgot it. And anyone who's ever listened to any of the tapes that he made, he was always such a gentle guy. And the way he talked was, you knew that he was speaking his truth, and he didn't have to shout, and he didn't have to get fancy or anything like that. It was just matter of fact, this is the way it is. Or at least the way it was for him, because he wasn't trying to persuade anybody of anything. And I think that's an important thing to recognize, is that even though as individuals we may believe something, a lot of times those beliefs are completely subjective. There is no way to prove them, but you can prove them to yourself. There is no way to prove them to somebody else.
Right.
But you can prove them to yourself to the point where you go, oh, yeah, every time this and this and this happens, then that happens. And if you pay attention to it and it happens, once is a happenstance, 2 is a coincidence, 3 is getting there, 4, 5, 6, 10 of them, it becomes a law.
Right. In one of the group chats I'm in, one of the guys had, because I had postulated that, just like all things, it's subjective of how you want to interpret a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Had to do with some religious, political stuff, and one of the guys argued with me, saying, yeah, well, sure, most things are subjective, but there is such a thing as objective truth, and the more we can come closer to that, the more wise we become. And I almost responded with, right, and the way that we know it's objectively true is that we believe it to be so.
Yeah, right.
And then I just deleted it and then just put a thumbs up on his response.
Right,
because it was just, there was nothing to do there, because it was, like yesterday, with my guest, I got some pushback because I was speaking in generalities. And I said, well, we as humans evolved to work and think in those ways. And people with a little bit of discernment and awareness know that there are always exceptions to these statements we make. For instance, if I ask you what color is the sky, you'll tell me blue. Mm-hmm. But if we look out right now, it's gray. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's purple. Sometimes it's orange.
Right.
Sometimes it's red. I've seen it black sometimes. Mm-hmm. But we say the sky's blue.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, generally.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we operate in that realm, and when something is important and we need to go into the details, we do. Mm-hmm. And people who have some sophistication do that. But just because there are exceptions does not mean, generally speaking, it's not true.
Right.
So I don't engage in that. And while recognizing that, of course, there are exceptions, but when I'm speaking broadly, I'm going to use broad terms, and the exceptions do not disprove it.
Right. Right. And whenever people bring up exceptions like that, there's 2 reasons why people would do it. One, the first reason that I would think of if I brought something up, would be to learn about, what is the distinction that you've made that I haven't made or haven't considered or something like that. And the other reason that people do it is so that they can, respond in a way that cuts the other person's ideas out or down or.
Without having to actually respond.
Yeah, right.
Right. It's not a good faith discussion.
Yeah.
But if one can do that and get down into the nitty gritty, that's fun. A lot of that can be fun.
Well, and it's not only fun, it's sometimes
it's necessary.
Some of the dumbest people say some of the most amazing things, and you go, oh man, I thought that guy was stupid, and I'm the one that didn't get it.
Right. And yeah, I've seen my mom be in a group like that where no one was really understanding what she was trying to convey. And at first I did not, and then I saw it. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But I didn't jump in because having a bunch of people going on about it, I thought, Ma can just stick to it. And it was interesting because most of them were trying to understand, and some were just thinking, oh, she's just wrong. But then people began to grok at it. But the thing is, they had this idea that, okay, she's been right about the things that she stands on, that she's firm on. So what are we not understanding? And to see that approach from in the group, but kind of an outside perspective, especially with the close relationship I have with her, and I could see the different responses of people who could take her word for it even though they didn't understand, but they're like, oh, okay, we believe she's right and she's smart, but we don't get it, so what are we missing? And I saw those who approached it that way, they were the first ones to get it. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, you're right, because if we do blah, 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 right, because, oh, yeah, okay, great, awesome. And it was really funny to see that, but it was the difference in the relationship and the rapport and also the good faith engagement of, mm-hmm. Well, if you're being staunch on this, there must be something that we're missing because and that was really interesting to see because I hadn't really thought about it that way before. But again, it comes down to if you're seeking truth, if you're seeking understanding, at some point you'll probably get it. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you just want to have your way, mm-hmm. The rest be damned. Then,
right.
Okay.
Right. And a lot of these beliefs come from our early childhood. And boy, getting over them. If you don't have a catastrophic event in your life that really sucks you up short and, pulls on your halter, you might just go through life just wounded and
right.
not even realize it.
Right. It's just like, I don't think I brought it up on the podcast before, but there's a paradox, and I keep bringing it up the last 2 weeks, but I still haven't looked up the actual term for it. But it's where a really bad situation is better than a not so bad situation, because a not so bad situation you might stay in for a year or the rest of your life, whereas a situation that's just like it but worse, you won't stay in that for more than a day,
right,
or an hour, because you just realize it's so bad. And therefore, it's just like a job where it's like, it pays a bill, you don't like it, but you don't hate it, but it's enough to get by, then you might get stuck in that. Whereas if it's a bad job, a lot of the success stories that I've heard involved with being in a job that they just absolutely couldn't stand. Like, I am never doing that again. I can't do that. What can I do?
Yeah. I remember my father-in-law, whenever I was dating my ex-wife, uh, he was a coal miner. And every day, whenever I went down there to see my ex, every day, if he was coming home from work, he cursed the mine, or if he was leaving to go to work, he cursed the mine. He cursed that mine every day, every day, every day. And, I listened to it for 6 months or something. And one day I said to him, why would you ever work a job that you hate? I just can't fathom that. Well, you wait till you guys get married and you have kids and that kind of stuff, and you'll do that. And I thought, no, no, never. And anytime I've never really had very many jobs, but anytime I had a job and I got to the point where it wasn't fun, I'm out of there.
Right.
I'm just it ain't happening on my watch.
and then to have such a lack of courage to then just blame it on your wife and kids.
Right.
That's not as an outside perspective, as another man, putting myself in that situation, for me that just comes back to fear, despair, guilt, desire,
right,
shame, somewhere in that low
right
scale of that tone of where it's, well, you're afraid, and instead of saying, I'm afraid to change or take the bull by the horns, I'm going to blame my wife and kids.
Mm-hmm. Right, or blame circumstances. In that case, I don't think he blamed his wife and kids, but he blamed circumstances. And I from my study of psychology and that stuff, I know that his initial problems were that his father died whenever he was 11 or 12 years old. And for some reason, he believed that he had to be the man of the family to provide money for his mother to live and his siblings to live. And yet, he was like 11 years old when that happened. He had 2 or 3 older brothers that were in their 20s maybe, or late teens and that kind of stuff. And they all went to work in order to produce money for him, for her. But he had to go out, at 11 years old, he went in the coal mine and he hated it. And he just put up with it and that stuff because he had this belief that that was the only thing he had going for him.
Right. Yeah. It's those things that we get stuck in, and that's one of the things I've been so grateful for with the stutter, is that it never really allowed me to get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Because I never saw it as something I just had to accept.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been such a driver of change in my life. And it's, I don't know, taking up my cross willingly every day.
Yeah.
Of where it was not just something that I accepted as, oh, this is a part of me, like being a redhead or something like that. It was just, it's been one of the best things that could have ever happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people have talked about it, about your greatest success is right behind your biggest obstacle, or your greatest burden is your stepping stone to your success. And a lot of different ways that they say it. And I was fortunate to be exposed to that, like in the group chat, one of the group chats I'm in with a bunch of families. A lot of stuff gets shared, like Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton and Tony Robbins and a lot of things like that, where I was like, oh, I had access to all these books when I was a kid. I read these and did these. And
right. And your brothers and sisters would have had access to them too, but there's no evidence that they ever read them.
Well, Jared really got into, I think, The Power of Now by Tony Robbins. We had the cassette. It was not The Power of Now.
Yeah,
It was The Power Within, Release the Power Within, or
yeah, something like
You
that.
Have the Power
Unlimited
Within.
power.
That's it.
Unlimited power.
Unlimited Power. And I digitized them all for him as a gift. I and as far as I can recollect, he actually listened to them all. And
You say you digitized them. How
yeah,
did you do that?
from a cassette to CD. So it was there was a way I found out.
Oh, so that it was still the voice talking.
Right.
Yeah,
So
you
it was just
put it on. It took it from a tape to a CD.
right, and this
Okay.
is how I can date myself, is the fact that we had when we bought books on tape, and I still use that term. Oh yeah, I just bought a book on tape.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's like I actually got it on Audible.
Right,
But it's
yeah.
like, oh, it's a book on tape, and so it was from cassette to my computer, and then from there to a
Right.
CD. And I, taught myself to do that as a kid. I was so proud of myself.
Yeah.
Because my parents told me, well, go figure it out.
Right.
And I believed I could, because as a kid, I had all these small experiences of where, I'd say, I can't do it. Please help me. And it's like, no, you can figure it out.
Right.
Here's how. Go and do it. And then I would. It's like, oh, I can do it.
Right.
So, it was one of the great things about growing up the way.
Sure.
And so I did that. So I know Jared did, and he's done very well for himself financially, and but I don't think he's ever listened to them again. I don't think he's read any of the books on this subject.
Yeah,
But he has
was
2 master's degrees, and
that was one of the
all that.
mistakes that I made, and I didn't realize it till just within the last year or so. Is that reading these books just once is not good enough. You have to study them, and you have to study them for the purpose of you learning experientially,
Mhm.
rather than just in theory.
Right.
You can get the theory of them, and I know that when I read Unlimited Power, the first time I read it, I knew that every page was opening me up to, new ideas and concepts that I had never really thought about before, but I knew that there was more in the book than I got out of the first reading. So as soon as I finished it, I started over again and read it the second time, and of course, whenever you're reading, your mind will get ahead of where your eyes are on the page, and you'll start to think about something else. And if you keep on going, if you keep on moving your eyes across the page, you're not getting what is on the page because you're all tied up in your own mind, and that part of the process, you can't focus on 2 things at the same time. So the second time you read the book, you'll find all kinds of things in there that you never consciously got
Right.
the first time through it. And by the third time, you start to recognize patterns that, okay, I realize that I've got that part. And then, you skip down, you start being more selective about it. And one of the things that Tony Robbins taught was that if you take a book like that, or like this one, if this book really speaks to you in some way that tells you that, okay, there's more in this book than what I got from the first time reading it, and then you read it again and again and again, by the time you get to like the third reading, take a highlighter and mark all the sentences that stand out to you, things that you totally agree with, or want to agree with, and highlight them. And then the next time you go back over the book, just read the highlighted sections, and anything that really jumps out at you, use a pen and a straight edge and underline those. And then after that, I generally do it between New Year's and or Christmas and New Year's, is I take all the books that I have marked up like that, and I just read the underlined sentences, and the whole book will come back to my mind.
Nice. That's great.
You know, and a lot of times it still amazes me at how many times one of the books that I just absolutely love is a book that's called As a Man Thinketh. And I had it in a little pocketbook form. It was about that tall and that wide, and maybe that thick, hardbound, printed by Philadelphia Press. And I carried one in the pocket of my hunting coat. And whenever I would go out hunting every year, and I, stop to wait for a deer to come wandering by or something, I would, find myself a good comfortable stump and go sit on it and pull my little book out, and I would read and meditate on that, till something came by or it got dark, whichever came first.
Right.
And I just so enjoyed the book, and I don't remember where I had found the first copy, but it took me four or 5 years of reading the book and knowing that it had great value in it for people. And I finally found a thing, and I bought, it was either 10 or 12 copies at one time. Same book from the same company. And I gave that book away, and it really amazed me looking back on it. Was there were some people that I would say, here's a little book that just has amazing information in it, and I think it would benefit you to read this thing. And it's just a small book. I mean, it only takes
Right.
an hour or so to read the damn thing.
Right.
And the amount of people that went to reach for the book and then pulled their hand back. Oh, no. And they knew intuitively that they didn't want to hear what was being said in that book.
Right.
And of all the books that I gave out, and some of the people would, I would give them out and they would give them back. Well, you could tell that the spine had never been opened. The only one that really took effect was I gave one to one of my nephews, and whenever he was out here hunting with me, and he couldn't make head nor tail of it, and I don't know that he really tried, but his younger brother got a hold of it. His younger brother read it. It's, oh man, I have a lot in common with Uncle Cliff,
Right. Yeah, that's one thing I found is that, and one thing I've been able to enjoy, and it's brought me a lot of peace, is if I read a book that I know has value for me, but I just can't get into it.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like a slog. I know that at some point I'll come back to it. And also there are some times where it's another book that opens up a new thought channel.
Right.
That then allows me to appreciate that book. And then I can, oh, here's what's going on. Here's what's up. Mm-hmm. Here's all of this stuff. And that's one of the things that I couldn't get on board with there. When I was a kid, I'd heard a few different pastors talk about how, all these self-help books and blah, 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 all you need is the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, what if you don't understand the Bible?
Right.
What if there are other books that help you understand it?
Right.
What if you can't get value out of it without first reading something simple like As a Man Thinketh?
Uh-huh.
And,
right, and the title comes from the Bible.
right. And it's just, and it's because of books like that have allowed me to read scripture. It was books like that got it to the point where I told my parents, I'm going to be uh, reading scripture, and my dad gave me a copy. And it was such an amazing experience because with him being my stepdad, he has none of his own natural children. And it really helped establish more of a relationship with us because he told me, he said, I never thought I'd be able to give my son a Bible, and I'm so happy I can.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a wonderful experience for both of us where, we may approach it differently, but it's because of all these different books I've read that have gotten me to the point where I can appreciate something like the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So to have some pastor tell me you don't need a different book than this to help yourself, then it's like,
Yeah.
no.
And that's one of the wonderful things about having a little getaway cabin
Oh, yeah.
out in the woods is you get it up there and whenever you finally get finished cleaning things up from the mess that you left the last time,
Speak for yourself.
Yeah.
And your friends.
So but you can set down in the quietude of just being out there, and especially if you don't have cell services or anything like that, to interrupt you. Um, and I would recommend that you just take a whole bunch of those books that you know that there's something in there. I mean, you can pick it up and you can feel it coming through the cover, and just commit yourself to finishing the book and getting as much information as you can out of it. And once you do that, and you're conscious of what you're learning or the things that are impacting you, and if you get to the point where you touch the book and you say, "Oh, I've learned everything that book has for me at this moment," well,
Right.
don't read it for a year or two.
Right.
And just go out at it. And one of the things that I did was I wanted to build a cabin, a getaway place like that, especially someplace to go hunting. And I come up with this idea that if I went out around the area that I wanted to hunt in, and I started talking to primarily farmers, was who I was interested in, people that had large tracts of land, and make a deal with them that if they would lease me 1 acre of ground and an access to that acre of ground, uh, and I would build a cabin on it out of my own pocket, and I could use the cabin for the rest of my life. And whenever I died, they would have the cabin. And if they wanted to use it in between times, if somebody came by and I wasn't using it, they could use it too. I mean, it was for my pleasure. It wasn't for my ownership
Right.
of the thing. And it didn't take long until I actually got a phone call offering me, hey, if you'll build a cabin on my ground, I'll make that kind of a deal with you. So that took care of a major expense for me. And then I've had a lot of experience in building. I've built 162 houses, so I know about everything there is to know about how to build. And I decided I would make this a project to where I could build something that was elegant and beautiful and just an artistic expression of my knowledge about how to build out of knick-knack nothing and that sort of thing. And I ended up building a 400 square foot cabin with a 120-foot porch or something like that on the front of it. And I did the whole thing for it was close to $3,000. It might have been about $3,100 out of pocket, and that includes the wood heating stove, and the kitchen range, and the bathroom, the
Sink.
water pumps, the water heater, uh, lighting fixtures, everything.
Right.
That it really wasn't much of a cost, compared to, buying a camp trailer or something like that for 15-20 grand.
Right.
And of course it's going to be there for forever and ever and ever. And the guys that gave me the land have become friends with my grandson Max, and he's helped them with projects and that kind of stuff. And they tell him, well, whenever your pap dies, you can still hunt here.
Nice. That's great. Well, that one of the things that struck me when I was building my cabin, and I had it up, and I was first showing people pictures of it, because I have clients who are very well to do, and I would show them the cabin and the view, and they would just go, "Wow, wow, you're so lucky that you have that." And the funny thing was is that they didn't have that.
Right.
And, they had a giant RV that they would
Right.
go on camp sometimes and do that, but they had to find a camping spot.
Right.
They had to, when they would go camping, it was a whole process, whereas, like, today I'm just going to pop out there and spend the night there because I have stuff to do the next day. So I get to just go out there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to set up a camping spot. Don't have to do all that.
Right.
And the first time I had a client who owned a home that's, $3 million tell me how lucky I was and how did I find a spot like that.
Oh, right, sure.
It was just, wow. Good on you, young man. Good on you.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah,
like,
you
oh, wow.
have to come up with creative solutions and that sort of things. Now, I can tell our audience that, if you don't have building skills and one of your buddies does, psych him up about the project, and,
Right.
the two of you go out and do the thing. And like I say, the big expense is always land. And once you get that taken care of, you just write a lease with the guy, and this is what it is. I'm going to build this cabin on your property, and I'm going to use it whenever I want to hunt, and whenever I die, you have it. It's all yours.
Yeah. Works out great. And you had that relationship you could cultivate from hunting out there, and I was able to cultivate that kind of relationship with my parents, and which is kind of funny because a younger me would have thought, that's not a big deal. Of course you can do stuff like that with your parents.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out that's not always the case.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah.
Like, you don't want to be nearby. They don't want you nearby. They're afraid of the assessor, or just whatever
Right.
stuff that goes on that makes it just one or both parties just don't want to get involved with that. Where it's
Right.
like, my parents,
Yeah.
it's best if I keep them at arm's length.
Yeah.
And the fact that I've been able to cultivate a relationship with my parents where they were gung-ho about it and they supported it, and I was able to do that and use their land, and I mean, talk about a blessing.
Yeah, and one of the things to recognize too is when the county is going to be the first outfit that you're going to have to appease if you cross the line, and their line is at 200 square feet. If you build a structure under 200 square feet, you don't need a permit.
Hmm.
So I'm saying, well, the best size of structure to do on that thing is instead of going 12 by 16, go 11 by 18.
Mm.
And it just stretches the thing out, and the 11 foot is fine. Or you could go to a 10 by 20. That kind of gets you a little bit narrow. I prefer the 11 by 18. But if you build that style, and then you put a peaked roof on it, and you put a steep roof on it, like a 12-12 pitch, so that all the snow and that stuff, you don't have to worry about being up there and shoveling it off in the wintertime or anything like that. And then put I like metal roofs because they'll slick the snow off, right away. But if you put a roof on it with a 12-12 pitch, if you put a floor in there that is the bottom of the joist or 7 foot up, and you can use 2x6s for the joist, and then you make the wall at like 9 foot, on that, you'd have 40, the peak of your roof is going to be 45 inches above the eave, and till you get another 1.5 foot on 45 inches, you're up to the point where you can stand up. Up in there, that you can put your loft up above, and a mattress up there or something,
and not crawl in and crawl out type deal, because that's what I absolutely didn't want to have on mine.
right.
And it's been cool because it takes about a year and a half for things to catch up, but my cabin now shows up on Google Earth,
Oh yeah,
and I can show people the straight line to my folks' house, and you can't tell how far away it is because the hill's so steep.
right,
But it's just this neat little thing, and it's the green tin roof, and it's right there.
right,
And it's so much fun seeing that actually on Google
Right.
now.
right.
And it's been such a quantum of solace for me, and it was up there over Christmas and New Year's where I had just such really great experience, because being in there, no lights, just the light off of the propane and the kerosene heater, and the moon over the river canyon, and I'm up on top of the ridge, so it's just that ambient light that's out there, and it just being quiet and no electronic sounds from a fridge or a
Yeah,
hum, and it's a place that I built, and I can just still look at it and be aware of all of the things that I did and remember it while thinking about something else. And it's a thing I've been reminding myself of more because of the people I've encountered lately and been involved with, of where I just remind myself of I'm grateful for the fact that I can be grateful.
right,
And I have so many things that remind me of how lucky I am
right,
and how grateful I can be. And I know a lot of people where they don't recognize a lot of the things in their lives that I would consider blessings, miracles. They just kind of take it all as par for the course.
right,
And I love the fact that something as mundane as having lunch with my parents, or being back at the family home, being out in the woods, skiing, being on a dirt bike, all these things that I've been doing for years and years, and the fact that I still get to do them,
mm-hmm.
the fact that I still get to experience that and enjoy it, something like that really is just such a blessing, and I don't have to go hog wild and something new and exciting all the time, being able to just appreciate, to find out the things that really bring me the most pleasure and joy and peace and contentment, and focusing more on that has made all the difference in
Yeah.
my life.
Yeah, I was just watching a podcast there last night of a guy, I'm sure he's from Russia or Ukraine, someplace. He's speaking Russian. Uh, and he has built a little log cabin that is about 8 feet by 10 feet, with the roof that sticks out over the cabin by about 4 feet out the front. And he has two little windows that are, a foot square or something like that. And the walls are only like 5 feet high, and then he's got the pitched roof on it. So he has a little window right up there in the eave, or in the gable. And he has them so that they'll open and that sort of thing. And then he has this wood stove in there that has the wood box, and I mean it would be something simple to build, but the wood box would be like 12 inches square by 2 feet long. Has the door in the front, has the chimney in the back, and then he took expanded metal and made a fence around the top of that stove, and he stacked big rocks in it so that they heat up whenever the stove heats up, and then they radiate heat all night long.
That makes sense.
And he has a bunk across the back of it, which is nothing more than just a 3 foot sheet of plywood or something, because he's only 8 feet wide. So he has that piece of plywood up there, and then he has a little bit of a counter someplace to set his laptop on. And, he goes up there in the wintertime and snowshoes back in and that sort of stuff and just spends the night in his little getaway.
Yeah.
And that would be big enough really for two people that just use it for that purpose. Just
right.
For,
It's not to live in. It's just
yeah,
to
right.
sleep, eat, and get on the laptop and get out of the cold after a day out hiking. And
Right. Yeah. And I would imagine that, now in his case there, I don't know who owns the land or whether he owns the land or whatever, but it's in a forest, and the trees there are 10, 12 inches in diameter. And that's what he used for the logs. And they're probably 5 logs high. I mean, it was just, I think he quit building high whenever he couldn't lift the log anymore by himself.
Makes sense.
And then put the gables on it and framed his roof in and that sort of thing. And now, I don't know, there was all kinds of snow over the roof and that stuff, but I get the impression that he just used poles running up the rake to a ridge beam, and he just put in poles that big around, just one after the next, and then covered that with some really heavy plastic, and then put moss on it, dug up moss in the area that's he can cut into pads that are that big and stack that moss on top of it. And the moss protects the plastic from sun burnout and that sort of thing. But it supplies the real leak-proof part of the roof. But if you have a place that's got a lot of moss, or where there's a lot of moss, and I've seen other people. One of the things about the moss was that it would give you insulation from the heat in the summertime and insulation from the cold in the wintertime. And of course, you never shovel something like that off,
Right.
Because it has all this structural support. It would handle snow at 3 or 4 feet deep. And you wouldn't have to worry about it at all.
One of the things I've thought about doing, because I do want to build another cabin, and I would even do it the same way I built the last one by stacking, caulking, and nailing mill ends.
Mm-hmm.
I would do a better job this time. And one of the things I thought about was my folks had built a couple underground domes,
Mm-hmm.
and so the front end was the only thing not buried. And it really came in handy with the family home we built out here. There's a material called bentonite.
Clay.
Yeah, that may not be the term. I may be confusing it, but it's like a thick, like tar material that's rolled out, and it gets nailed into stem walls, and it completely seals it, because the house is burned into the mountain where I grew up.
Uh-huh.
And so half of it is in the mountain, the first floor, half of it is in the mountain, and half of it is not. but there's never been any moisture, mildew, smell,
Right.
nothing at all like that. And it was one of the tricks I had learned from building underground homes was using this. It rhymes with bentonite at least, but it's this sheeting that one can put on, and it's all around all of the stem walls.
Right.
On the outside, and just nothing gets in, and just gets nailed, and it's been there for
Right.
3 decades.
Yeah,
and
I'm sure there's products like that. Bentonite is a clay that's
Right.
a waterproof thing, so it might be bentonite in a sheet.
Right.
I mean, they might press it, you know,
Right.
put bentonite between layers or something like that, and it would be called bentonite, or that would be a possibility.
And
One of the projects that I got involved with was I worked for a couple of years over in Montana, and there was a guy there that had bought 40 acres and moved from, where was he from? He was from New England someplace, up there, New Hampshire maybe. And he moved the whole way across the country, moved his wife and 3 kids out there, had never been west of the Mississippi, hadn't even been close to the Mississippi. And he moved out, and of course, he was thinking that, you know, boy, I bought 40 acres in Montana, big timber and all that kind of stuff, and it was, you know, fairly close. I don't know how close it would have been to the town called Big Timber, but anyway, like the town of Big Timber, there's no timber there.
right, of course, of course.
You know, and it was just all, you know, sagebrush and cheatgrass and, you know, rolling hills and that sort of thing. Did have a good year-round stream that was, you know, it was 12 or 15 feet wide and 3 inches deep or something like that, you know. Good stream. And he bought that, and then he went around and he found buildings to take down. Somebody had a building on their property and they wanted it out of there. And one of the buildings he got was a big old commercial building, and it had corrugated roofing on it, which had rusted over the years and that sort of stuff, and was nailed on. And he went inside it, and he just took a 2x4 and he nailed a piece of 2x4 across the top and nailed it so it was, you know, 3.5 inches wide. 2 nails into the end of this 2x4, and him and his kids would go through there and they would punch up on that roof right beside the nails, and it would just strip the nails right through the roofing. And he got, I mean, he had truckloads of metal that was, I don't know whether it was 10 feet or 12 feet long, but might have been 12 feet long. And it was corrugated and had all these holes in it. And what he did was he dug back into the bank, and he just took a trailer house that they had lived in, and he used that plan. So it had 2 bedrooms on this end, and then a bathroom, and then the kitchen, living, dining room, and then there was a master bedroom on that end, and another bath over there on that end. And it was 12, I think his trailer was 12 feet, and he made this one 14 feet wide. So it was like 14 by 70 or something like that. And he took railroad ties and dug a little hole and stuck them into the ground. He had already got in there with a backhoe, you know, and cleaned out. He had a pretty straight wall. And then he took this corrugated metal and he put these railroad ties every 6 feet, and took this corrugated metal and laid it down horizontal, and then he put a tar coat on it, you know, foundation coating on it, painted that on it, and then he put another sheet over that, but he misaligned the nail holes, pushed it one way, put another coat on it, put a third sheet on it, and brought it back the other way, and then put that. So he used all of that roofing for not only the back wall of the roof and that sort of stuff, but up on the roof to because he buried the whole house, you know, and he put the metal on there, and he put like 5 or 6 layers of metal because he had so much of it.
Right.
And then he put windows out of the same big old commercial building. You know, it was a factory type thing, so it had these massive windows. They were all the 8 by 10 panes, but you know the windows themselves. And then he set the front wall at about an angle like that, and then his ceiling come down on an angle like that to shed the water off. And he built or he extended those beams out. I think they were like 4 foot long. They cantilevered by about 4 foot. Then he put this beam down like that, and he put the windows both in the vertical wall and windows in the slant wall, and that was his greenhouse
Oh, cool.
in between the two.
Cool.
And then we we built him a couple years later. We went in there and dug beside his master bedroom and used forms and built a concrete root cellar off the end of that bedroom, cut a door into it from the bedroom, and then covered that whole thing up with dirt. And he put shelves all around the inside of it. And then whenever we poured it, I had him pour 2 pieces of rebar in there that we had just taken it and bent it in a loop like that, and then stick it through the plywood that we use for a form to pour the concrete roof on it. And the roof had rebar in it. And then whenever all of that plywood was taken down out of there, here's these 2 loops that you could put a block and tackle in and pull a deer up.
Oh, that's cool.
Hang a deer, you know,
Nice.
at 50 degrees temperature in the middle of the summer.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, one of the reasons I brought that up about the bentonite sheeting, pretty sure that was it, is because the next cabin I do, however I build it, frame it, is I would really like to have a bit of a basement.
Mm-hmm.
And I would also like some elevation. And so if I built, an 8 foot deep root cellar type of deal,
Mm-hmm.
for one, it would help a lot with keeping the cabin cool. Because that's one of the things I found is that it just gets so bloody hot up there.
Mm-hmm.
And to have that and, 18 by 11, if I build it down near the south gate, could get a concrete truck up there to pour a slab. And hell, I might even just have them pour the stem walls while I'm there if I just framed up the stem walls instead of doing like cinder block.
Right.
Could.
Yeah. You could use cinder block, but you could pour it too.
Right. And so if I did that, if I had 8 feet and then or even 7 feet and then the floor joists on top, then I could do that and have a dry basement. I think that would be so cool. One, for storage, help keep it cool,
Mm-hmm.
and the elevation.
Right.
And I just really like
Yeah.
that idea.
Yeah, and if you put 2-inch styrofoam on the outside of the concrete, the whole way to the top of the concrete, then that concrete becomes a heat sink pulling 50-degree temperature up the walls,
Oh, nice.
and it'll keep stuff cool and dry and all of that sort of stuff that you can store all kinds of stuff that you would need. And then if you if you set the floor up, and let's say the upper side, you're on a hill like that, there's the upper side is sticking out of the ground by a foot or so, you could put the deck on the lower side, and that gets you out over the rest of the hill and gives you a view,
Right.
and all of that sort of thing.
Be-
Just like the deck you have on your cabin now.
Right. And the big thing is because it would be so much fun to have friends out and also even rent it out or, be used as a retreat type of deal.
Mhm.
And wherever I end up building it, but I really, really do like that idea. And I really like the mill ends I used.
Mm-hmm.
And I know now a better way to do it and a faster, more efficient way to do it.
Right.
There are just a lot of things that I didn't know until I did them, where it's like,
Right.
oh, well.
And if you bought 2x6 mill ends
Mm-hmm.
and then cut them to 3.5, 4 inches on a
Mm-hmm.
table saw, you could put all of those smooth sides in,
Mm-hmm.
and then you'd have that all the bark sides and that kind of stuff kind of out, because
right.
it looks really good in there. It it has a good external presence in that it's natural,
Mm-hmm.
all natural wood, and yet the inside of it,
Is finished.
yeah,
Right.
could be finished and lacquered inside, and
And that's what I do with like my nephew or some friends. Is that's just what we would do for a few days, is get them planed on both sides, cut off, an inch or two on one side, and then just get so then they sit and they're square and they're all that, and then the inside,
right.
and
And
then just go ahead.
the only ones you'd have to plane are ones that are cupped like that,
Mm-hmm.
and you would plane them so that they are 1.5 inches thick. So you're just taking off the crown on the top, and then they have to be set on with the cup side up from the facing down to the bottom,
Yeah.
so that you can glue them, and that way you're moving up exactly 1.5 inches at every row.
Right. Yeah. And I just think it would be a really fun project. So we'll see where we end up doing it, but it's I had as much fun building it as I have had staying there.
Yeah,
And it was such
yeah,
a
it's
such a
one
great
of one of the
experience.
joys, and I just love little cabins. I mean, I just love the idea of them. Uh,
Yeah.
and the only thing with mine is it's 3.5 hours away.
Yeah.
That's the only problem whenever you want to go hunt someplace. But
Mine's just an hour away
yeah,
because I've already just been a lucky bastard.
yeah, there you
Yeah.
go,
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
you go. Yep,
Great, Cliff. Well, thanks, man.
yep. Okie
That was a
dokie.
fun little
Well,
chat.
we've been at it for an hour and 20 minutes or something.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll split this up a little bit, but
Yeah.
I think it was a really good conversation, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool.
All right.
Cool.
We'll see y'all next time.
Yep. Don't forget to like and subscribe.